Welcome everyone to Una Vida to Love. Today we'll be making some delicious and soft cinnamon rolls. I like baking this right before the kids come from school, so when they come they can smell the delicious smell of cinnamon. We're going to start with 2 tablespoons of active dry yeast. We're going to proof the yeast. We just want to make sure that it's working because we don't want to get everything ready and then your dough doesn't rise and you're gonna have to throw it away because it won't work. I will go ahead and link the recipe below, the one that I'm using. Now, I usually don't follow recipes to the T. I just like to see the general ingredients they use and then I kind of, whatever I have in my home. So I added the sugar because that helps the yeast activate. We'll mix it and then put it in a nice quiet place for about 5 minutes until we see the bubbles of the yeast or the yeast rising. We'll move to the next step. At this point, you're supposed to warm up some milk. Now, I did have milk, but I had some Greek vanilla yogurt that I diluted in some water because I wanted to use it before it expired. And why not in cinnamon rolls, right? It should taste good. But I didn't think that warming it up, it will curd the yogurt. But you know what? We'll just keep going. The yeast now have proofed nicely, and we'll move to the next step, which is adding the curd yogurt or just your warm milk at this point, and then butter, which it's supposed to be softened butter, not melted, but my butter wasn't soft enough, so I put it in the microwave for a little bit too long, and that's what we have now. We have melted butter. So we'll mix that for a little bit. We'll add our salt. Now, I'm gonna go ahead and add my eggs. I recommend you add your eggs in a little bowl first before you actually add them to the mixer or the mixture that you're mixing. Just because if you drop the egg or shells, it'll be hard to get them out due to the fact that you have a mixer on. But this is how I'm gonna do it. Just don't do what I'm doing. Couple of not tablespoons, a couple of cups of flour before we add the yeast to it. Add the yeast. You don't need a mixer to make the cinnamon rolls. You can do everything by hand. The harder part will be kneading the dough. When I first started baking, I didn't have a mixer. I actually did everything by hand, kneading by hand. And when I started baking more often, because I was also making my loaf of bread every week, that's when I decided to invest in a mixer. And I actually got this in a pretty good deal. I bought it on a Cyber Monday, and I don't think I ever seen the same price ever again. So we'll go ahead and continue adding the rest of the flour. I suggest you add it slowly because sometimes it depends on the humidity of your home, of the amount of flour that you're going to use. Sometimes it'll be a little bit more, sometimes it'll be a little bit less. I'll go ahead and change my hook to a dough hook mixer. As you can see, the dough is pretty sticky, and so we'll continue adding flour and hopefully stays in the bowl and not go all over the place. We're gonna make a snow. Since there's no snow outside, we'll make a snow in the kitchen. So what I'm looking for as I continue adding the flour, it's for the dough to start pulling from the side of the bowl. You do want to make sure that you're adding the flour little by little, because if you add too much, your dough can turn out to be too hard. It's easier to add more flour than to take flour away or add more liquid. It's just easier to just add the flour little by little. At this point, I can see my dough is starting to pull from the mixing bowl. It's almost to the point where I want it. But it needs a little bit more. I'm going to let this knead for about 3 minutes in the mixing bowl. Now, if you're doing it by hands, you might want to do until 5 or 6 minutes until it's nice and soft. If you can see, it's nice and soft, but it's not sticky. The texture is just nice and soft. So I'm gonna go ahead and oil the bowl. You can actually let it rise in the same bowl that you were mixing it. I just needed to use the bowl because I was baking some other stuff. And I like to use vegetable oil. You can also use butter, just because the vegetable oil doesn't affect the taste. If you use coconut oil or olive oil, they do have a distinct taste, but if it doesn't bother you, go ahead and use them. I think coconut oil would taste better if you were to need to use that. We'll go ahead and cover it and put it in a nice warm place and let it rise. I was actually baking something earlier. I was using the oven, so that's the best place I could put it at my home because that was the warmest. And it took about only an hour to rise. Look how nicely. So we'll go ahead and move to the next step. And that is mixing the mixture, the sugar mixture that is gonna go inside the cinnamon rolls. Now in the recipe, it says to spread the butter once you roll once you stretch the dough out. But I do things differently, and this is the way I'm doing it today. When I add my brown sugar, I make sure it's nicely packed. It was a bit hard to mix because the butter wasn't fully softened, but I made it work. So I divided the dough in 2 different portions. I'm only going to be baking some, and it was a bit too much for me to stretch out at once. I'm gonna go ahead and knead it for a little bit just to soften it out. And go ahead and dust your working area with a little bit of flour and your rolling pin. And now it's time to roll out. Something that looks like a rectangular will be better, but just roll it out and just make it work. That's what I do. And once it's nicely rolled out, I will go ahead and add the butter, sugar, and cinnamon mixture. What I do is, like I say, I only bake some of it, and the rest I flash freeze it. And what that is I put it in the freezer in the cookie sheet for about 30 minutes to an hour. And after that, I take it out and I store it in Ziploc bags and put it back in the refrigerator. And then I just take, whenever I want to go ahead and bake a cinnamon roll, I just go ahead and take it out of the freezer and put it in my baking sheet and let it rise. And it's ready to go in the oven without needing to do all these steps. Let's try to make this a little bit even as we possibly can. Once we're done, what I like to do is I like to pinch the edge of the end of the roll, so to make sure it doesn't come apart when I cut my rolls. Now you gotta make sure you use a nice sharp knife, so it makes it easier for you to cut the rolls. The ones I'm gonna freeze. And I only have one pizza. I like to also, when I do my homemade pizzas, that's the same steps I do. I flash freeze it and then I wrap it in saran film and then put it in the freezer, and they're ready for the kids. And now we're gonna go ahead and bake the rest of the cinnamon rolls right before the kids come from school. So when they come in and open that door, they can smell the freshly baked cinnamon rolls. Look how delicious that looks. Oh, my daughter ate some of that, didn't let me finish. And now I'm taking the rest out and freezing them, the ones that I flash freeze them. They're so easy. When you do that, it's so much easier because they don't stick together. That's the best part. I'm trying this new silicone bags, trying to reduce plastic. And they've been working great for me so far, so I'm very excited about these bags. So they're ready to be put in the refrigerator, and whenever we need one, we'll take one out. And that, it's music to my ear, hearing my kids so excited. Don't forget to like and subscribe and share this recipe. Hope you try it.